Good morning. Monday, June 19th, 2023. I wanted to update everybody who's been looking at my videos. I've done 633 videos on my YouTube channel. I have an update. I wrote a new book on baseball. It's my sixth baseball book, just used as a reference guide, exploring everything I can about the history of baseball, baseball players, baseball stats, baseball records. I've written 6 books. I'll just recap what I've done. My first book, Baseball is a Numbers Game. Examining the achievements and stats of Baseball Hall of Fame players. I focused on those who are in the Hall of Fame as of today. This turned out to be, 485 pages. And I have, listen to this, 83 chapters. I just get very, very detailed on just the achievements of Hall of Fame baseball players. Now, I wrote it in 2022. So those who didn't make the Hall of Fame, or those who have been elected to the Hall of Fame, their stats are not in here. Those who are elected in the year 2022, because I wrote it at the beginning of 2022. And the election occurred a little later, and then in the summer they were put into the Hall of Fame. But I do cover all those baseball players from the past, from 1870 up through 22, who are in the Baseball Hall of Fame. This was a labor of love. Give you an example of some of the chapters. Total hits record, total bases, home runs, RBIs, runs scored, 3,000 hit. Those players who have 3,000 hits, best hitters in the 1870s, 1880s, so forth, all the way up through 2000. Then I rank players, top 50 home run hitters of all time, RBI hit leaders, runs scored leaders, singles, doubles, triples. I get into that. Then I get into pitching, the win-loss records, innings pitched. Then I get into the best pitchers in certain decades from the 1870s all the way up. Who were the best pitcher in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s? And I get into top 75 pitchers of all time. Then I get into favorite baseball records, World Series games. Give my the best individual offensive seasons of all time. This almost 500 pages. That was my first book on baseball. Then I said, hey, you know what? Let's get really, really detailed. My second book on baseball. Baseball matchups. Who is the greatest? It's my second book. And look what happened on this one. I got 801 pages in this one. And it was 38 chapters. What did I do in this one? What's different than that other book? The other book covered the Hall of Fame players. This one also covers Baseball Hall of Fame players, but what I did, I got very, very detailed. I matched up individual players' stats against another player. It's called matchups. And I have about, what was it? Let's see how many did I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 categories of what a baseball player accomplished as far as stats. Career average, runs scored, runs batted in, home runs, triples, doubles, singles, total bases, slugging, on base, base on balls, stolen bases, 100 RBI seasons, 100 runs scored seasons, highest average in a season, most hits in a season, most 200 hit seasons, and total career hits. 20 categories. And I matched up players. And so each chapter, I focused on, let's say, one category and matched up the top players in that category. Following me? For example, home runs. Chapter 1 was home runs. So I got 25 players, the top 25 home run hitters of all time in the Hall of Fame. We know Henry Aaron's number 1. You got Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Ken Griffey. Go all the way down the list, ranked to number 25. And I matched up the players' stats in 20 categories, all those categories I mentioned, right? And see who won the matchup. Now, obviously, some players played longer than others. For example, Babe Ruth played 22 years. Henry Aaron played 23. But what happened with Aaron was he had 12,364 at-bats, where Babe Ruth only had 8,399. So how do you match them up? You do a what if. What if Babe Ruth and Henry Aaron played the same number of games and the same number of at-bats? Who wins the matchup? And so I presupposed it. Found out what the average of what Babe Ruth was doing in all the games he played. And what was the average of what Henry Aaron was doing in every game he played? How many home runs per game did Aaron average? Ruth, how much did he average? How many hits? Divide Ruth's hits and how many games he plays. You come up with a certain number. So you add the games for Ruth, he matches Aaron, and you see who would have ended up with more hits if they played the same number of games. Following me there? I did that with all the matchups. It was a labor of love. Did you know that in the Henry Aaron and Babe Ruth matchup, Babe Ruth won 14 categories out of 20. Aaron won 5, and then they tied in 1. Because I had them both playing the same number of games and did their averages in all the categories. For example, in home runs, Babe Ruth has 714, but he only played 2,500 games. Aaron hit 755, but it took him 3,298. Have Ruth play 3,298 games. Find out what he was averaging of home runs per game played. How many home runs would Ruth have ended up with? Well, it looks like about 700 more games Ruth would have had to have played to match Aaron, and he would have ended up with 940 homers. So he wins the category in home runs. Fair? Is that fair? I think it is. So that's a matchup I did. Babe Ruth beat Henry Aaron in 14 other categories. He beat him in career average, runs scored, RBIs, beat him in total bases, base on balls, 100 RBI seasons. Ruth had 13 of them. Aaron had 10. Runs scored, highest in a season, most RBIs in a season, most better average in a season. Where did Aaron win? He beat Ruth in doubles, singles, stolen bases, 100 runs scored seasons, and most hits in a season. See, so he won 5 categories, but I got 20 categories. Ruth wins the matchup. I go through all the Hall of Fame players and all the matchups. 801 pages, 38 chapters. That was my second book. That was a lot of fun, that book. Then my third book, Baseball All-Time Defensive Player Matchups. So I said, hey, let's do defense. Who is the best defensive player of all time? You know what I found out? Tris Speaker, who played center fielder, was the best defensive player of all time. Tris Speaker. How did I come out to that? Well, I did a lot of categories in defense. And I did all the positions. You have, obviously, 9 defensive positions, right? Pitcher, catcher, first, second, short, third, left, center, right. Find out which players played in those positions and what were their stats in defensive. What are the categories I had? Well, let's see. What categories did I have? All right, let's see. In this book, you have games played, fielding percentage, chances. How many chances did you have at your position? How many putouts did you have at your position? How many assists did you have at your position? How many double plays did you have in your position? And how about the fewest errors at your position? And how many innings did you play at your position? Those are all the categories. So I matched up a lot of players here. Tris Speaker, I told you, out of all the positions on the baseball diamond, he had the most chances, putouts, assists, fewest errors. There were other players that played longer, but as far as efficiency, Tris Speaker turned out to be, in my opinion, the greatest defensive player of all time. And you'd have to read the book to find out the stats and compare him with all the other players. He was better than Willie Mays as far as stats. Now, you may argue that Willie Mays was a better defensive player than Tris Speaker, not according to the stats. Speaker used to play in, and he got a lot of double plays. If the ball was hit to him, either he caught it and then threw out people at bases. He had more stats than Willie Mays in that category. He had fewer errors. He had more putouts. He had more chances. That's just an example of a matchup. So I go through all the positions, even I go through pitchers. What happened here? Let's see. I rank them toward the end. As far as catcher, according to this book, Gary Carter beat out Johnny Bench in defensive stats. In first base, Eddie Murray wins it. Second base, Ryan Sandberg. Third base, Brooks Robinson, obviously. Shortstop, Cal Ripken won it. Left field, Zach Wheat. Center field, Tris Speaker. Right field, Paul Waner. And in pitching, the guy who ranked up the best defensive stats was Greg Maddux. That was my third book, defense. Fourth book, old school versus new school baseball. Which players had better stats and achievements? The old school era or the new school era of baseball? So I divided it into two 75-year periods, 1872 through 1949 as old school. I looked at all the stats career average, hits, home runs, doubles, triples, so forth, RBIs, runs scored. I took all those players from the old school era and I compared them and matched them up with all the players from the new school era from 1950 to 2022. Who was a better baseball player and which era played better baseball and who had better stats and who is more dominant and who has more Hall of Fame players? Turned out the old school one from 1872 through 1949, and I proved it in this book. My fifth book, Baseball's Greatest Offensive Seasons of All Time. What did I do in this book? I said, again, I need to get detailed. Who had the best offensive season among everyday players and pitchers of all time? And so how do you do it? I had 12 categories here: batting average, runs scored, runs batted in, home runs, triples, doubles, singles, slugging percentage, on base percentage, base on balls, total bases, stolen bases. 12 categories. And in pitching, I did wins, innings, shutouts, and strikeouts. I looked at the stats and looked at the Pacific season. Who had the greatest seasons of all time by adding up all the 12 categories? I'll give you a hint. Babe Ruth is number one. By adding up 12 categories, he had a score of 2,904. What do I mean by that? Well, in his 1921 season, he batted .378, scored 177 runs, had 168 RBIs, had 59 homers, 16 triples, 44 doubles, 85 singles, slugged .846, on base .512, base on balls 145, total bases 457, and 17 stolen bases. Add up all those numbers, he has a score of 2,904, and no one else in the Baseball Hall of Fame beat him as far as the individual season. You look at all the players who have played. Even I looked at guys who are not in the Hall of Fame. Nobody got a score better than 2,904. You know who's number two? Babe Ruth, second. Score of 2,774. And then third was Babe Ruth, 2,772. So he has the top three offensive seasons of all time. Number four, Lou Gehrig, 2,718. And then you get Jimmy Fox, you get Hugh Duffy, Roger Hornsby. Then you get Ted Williams, Hack Wilson, Hornsby again, Chuck Klein, Gehrig again, Hornsby. Then you get Musial, had a good one, Larry Walker. So I go through and I rank them all. Greatest offensive seasons of all time. That was a lot of fun, that book. And then I just finished writing this book. Baseball's top 5 player list. The top 5 of individual seasons. Who landed in the top 5 in all these categories? So again, I go through all the different categories. Home runs, batting average, runs scored, runs batted in, triples, doubles, singles, total bases, slugging, on base, base on balls, stolen bases, and hits for the season. The top 5. And this includes everybody who ever played baseball. This book, 467 pages. Just finished writing it. And I'm going to do videos, and I'll point out my top 5 list here. This was a lot of love, or a lot of labor of love, too. And I'm writing my 7th book, and I'm going to focus on pitching. I haven't finished that one yet. Baseball's top 5 list. Who landed in the top 5 in all the individual seasons? starting with 1871. Who landed top 5 in home runs, RBIs, runs scored for the season? 1871. I go every year up through 2022. That was a lot of fun to do that. Looking at all the stats, and I covered everybody. Hall of Famers and anybody who played. Who landed in the top 5? That's my 6th book, and I'm writing my 7th one. I'm going to do on pitching. So I just want to give an update on the books I've written and what I've been doing with my time. I'm retired, so I can look at the baseball reference and look at all the stats and analyze it. It's good to have a hobby. These books are available on Amazon. Check it out if you're a baseball nerd. See what you think. Thanks for watching. I'm out.